Hi, this is Kevin Pollock with Prince William County's Office of Historic Preservation. I'm standing here in Auburn, Virginia, small crossroads town with Cedar Run here behind me, which was site of one of two battles fought on October 14th, 1863 during the Bristoe Station campaign. The other, of course, being one of the sites that we manage in Prince William County, Bristoe Station Battlefield Heritage Park, site of the afternoon fighting on October 14th. The Bristoe Station campaign began 5 days earlier on October 9th of 1863. Back in the fall of 1863, we're talking about several months after the Battle of Gettysburg, usually a time when not a lot of people think much happened here in Virginia during the course of the American Civil War. But instead, events out west helped to affect the events here in Virginia in the fall of 1863. Confederate forces had won a resounding victory at the Battle of Chickamauga, and then shortly thereafter they besieged Union soldiers inside of Chattanooga itself. As such, Union forces from the Army of the Potomac went out west to help that besieged Union garrison there at Chattanooga, and it helped to sort of even the odds between Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia and George Gordon Meade's Army of the Potomac here in Northern Virginia. Now, Lee decided in the fall of 1863 to launch an offensive campaign against the Army of the Potomac, looking to influence fall elections that were coming up in many of the northern states, but also then trying to get the Army of the Potomac on the move and defeat the Union Army in detail, something that Lee was always trying to do here in Virginia. So on October 9th, he began marching his army across and around George Meade's right flank with their objective being the town of Culpeper. Meade was able to pull his men back behind the strong defensive position at the Rappahannock River, and by October the 12th, Lee started a second maneuver to get around George Meade's right flank. There was fighting there that day on October 12th at Jeffersonton and Sulphur Springs. Lee's men were able to drive back the right end of the Army of the Potomac, and by early the next day, October 13th, Lee's Army of Northern Virginia was en route towards Warrenton, just a few miles up the road here from Auburn. It took Meade a long time to learn that the Confederate Army was now behind his line here on the Rappahannock River. And so early that morning, into the night, October 12th, into the morning of October 13th, Meade issued orders to his army to begin pulling back all the way towards Centerville, about 25 miles or less outside of Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, where Meade would then be able to plant himself firmly between the nation's capital and Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. With Meade's army on the move, heading back towards Centerville, and Lee's army just arriving in Warrenton a few miles down the road here from Auburn on the morning of October 13th, Lee was presented with a golden opportunity, having his enemy on the run, moving, and if Lee could move quickly enough, then he might just be able to achieve one of his objectives of defeating at least a portion of the Union Army here in Northern Virginia. However, before Lee could dispatch his army outside of Warrenton, he had to halt his army early the morning of the 13th while waiting for the wagon trains to catch up. And so Lee dispatched his cavalry chief, J.E.B. Stuart, down the road towards Auburn and ultimately towards Catlett Station, looking for an opportunity and trying to discover as much as he possibly could about the whereabouts of the Union Army there on October 13th, which brought the two engaging armies and two marching armies here to the small town of Auburn along Cedar Run behind me. To tell you more detail about the fighting here at Auburn on October 13th to the 14th, 1863, I'm going to turn it over to Sean Redmiles, who's director of the Fauquier History Museum at the Old Jail in downtown Warrenton, a good partner of ours and host of one of the sites of our cell tour with the Bristoe Station campaign.
Gouverneur K. Warren, the commander of the 2nd Corps, received orders on the morning of October 14th from General George Gordon Meade to take his corps to Catlett Station rather than to Greenwich. He realized that this put his corps in a difficult position as they were going to have to cross Cedar Run over Auburn Bridge, potentially with Confederate forces nearby in Warrenton, Virginia. On the morning, about 5 o'clock a.m., his corps reached this area, and he posted Caldwell's division on what became known as Coffee Hill, overlooking this intersection. He was right to be worried, as just a few miles down the road was the entirety of Lee's army at Warrenton, Virginia, ready to strike. Now, at the same time, on the morning of October 14th, General Stuart had arrived in Auburn and realized that he was in a precarious position. He was caught between two Federal columns making their way to Centerville, and he had no way to get out. He found a small ravine just behind Coffee Hill in its northwest direction, and he hid his nearly 3 brigades of Confederate cavalry during the entirety of the night, just as Federal troops were passing in front of them, not a few hundred yards away. Stuart sent several scouts to get between Union lines and make their way to Robert E. Lee to inform him of his position and hopefully make some action to get him out. On the morning of October 14th, about 5 o'clock, he sent General Richard Ewell down from Warrenton, Virginia, to make contact with the Federals and give Stuart a chance to escape. Stuart heard the beginning of skirmishing between the 10th New York and the advanced van of Ewell's corps, and in that moment decided that it was his time to strike. He was behind the Union position on Coffee Hill, and he opened up with several batteries of cannon fire that startled the Federals and caused them to spill coffee all over the hill, hence creating the name Coffee Hill. Stuart started his attack too early, as it turns out, and put himself in a precarious position as multiple Union forces were beginning to encircle him. He sent the 1st North Carolina on essentially a suicide mission to effect his own rescue. He got his 3 brigades out, but the 1st North Carolina took over 50% casualties in doing so. Meanwhile, Ewell is taking his corps down Double Poplar Road and attempting to encircle the entire 2nd Corps in the area of Auburn Village. He sends Early's division up to the north, he sends Rhodes' division up the center, and he sends Johnson's division on the right, and they slowly begin to encircle, but it is ultimately too late. Warren is able to take his entire corps across the bridge, up the road to Catlett Station, and rejoin the Union Army, where he is eventually going to be engaged in the Battle of Bristoe Station later in the day on October 14th. So while the Battle of Auburn was a small engagement with very few casualties, ultimately it kept an entire corps of Confederate troops engaged that could have been very useful later on at Bristoe Station. And it gave Gouverneur Warren a really nice moment on his generalship resume, because he was able to get his troops out of a difficult situation and not be encircled by an entire Confederate corps. So just like at every battle, the fighting affected the landscape and left a number of artifacts behind that actually at the Fauquier History Museum at the old jail, we have some of those artifacts. There was an archaeological dig a number of years ago, and if you come to the museum, you can see cavalry horseshoes, we've got bullets, we've got lapel pins, things that come from most likely Union soldiers encamped on Coffee Hill. We have them here at the museum. Come check them out anytime Wednesday through Monday, 11 to 4 o'clock.
After the fighting here on the morning of October 14th, the Army has then continued moving on closer towards Centerville. Most of the 2nd Corps, which did the lion's share of the fighting here the morning of the 14th, proceeded down to Catlett Station and then hit the Orange and Alexandria Railroad and began moving along the Orange and Alexandria back towards Centerville. It was there when they reached Bristoe Station on the afternoon of October 14th that they ran again into more Confederate soldiers, this time part of A.P. Hill's 3rd Corps. Hill's troops were trying to get at the rear of the Army of the Potomac as it made its way back towards safety, and rather than allowing them to go by, Hill's troops staged an attack against Gouverneur Warren's 2nd Corps there at Bristoe Station, so marking the 2nd time that the 2nd Corps was engaged in battle on October 14th. The battle there at Bristoe Station served as the climactic act of the Bristoe Station campaign itself. While it was a Confederate defeat, Union troops did escape that night, made their way back towards Centerville, and for all intents and purposes, Robert E. Lee could not find another way to get at the Army of the Potomac, and so the campaign came to an end. The stage was set that day on October 14th, both here at Auburn and at Bristoe Station. So we'd encourage you to come visit our sites related to the Bristoe Station campaign, both the Fauquier History Museum at the Old Jail in downtown Warrenton. You can follow it online and on Facebook as well, on social media. And I encourage you to come visit us at Bristoe Station Battlefield Heritage Park, also to visit the site of the other engagement on October 14th, the Battle of Bristoe Station. Continue to follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our website, pwcgov.org/history, for more information about the Bristoe Station campaign in 1863.